Hi, welcome to this session. I'm Jasmine Greenaway and I'll be walking you through data in Azure. Now this is supposed to be a high-level introductory walkthrough of all the services that are available in the Azure Data Platform. So this session is going to be really great for those of you who are interested in what the cloud has to offer in terms of data. And if you are pretty new to the cloud, I highly recommend that you go and check out Alex's video that focuses on introducing you to the cloud and into Azure. In this session, we're going to walk through all of the data services that are available in Azure and kind of split them up by the type of data that they use. And then we'll also walk through some services and a demo that you can follow along with as well. So if you're interested in following along in the demo that I'll walk through later, be sure to check out the video that walks through setting up your environment to do that. So now let's get started. In today's agenda, I'm going to introduce you to the cloud and why people love using the cloud to store their data. We'll talk through some terminology that you might come across as you're doing any self-guided study or any terms that you might hear and jargon that you might hear when people talk about the cloud. Then we'll go into databases. First, we'll start with relational databases such as Azure SQL and MySQL, and then we'll go through NoSQL offerings such as Cosmos DB. Then we'll work through unstructured data, because remember that data does not just end with databases. Files are also considered data. So any large files like images to any tiny files like text files, that is still considered data. So we'll walk through that with the Azure Storage account and Data Lake. And then we'll continue on with Azure Data Factory. And this is a really cool service that allows you to take your data source that you might have and copy it to another data source. And it doesn't have to be the same one, it could be a different format. But we'll walk through that later. Then we'll walk through an exercise where we'll take a Jupyter Notebook in Azure Machine Learning Studio. Then we'll use MySQL and Azure Data Factory to run a little aggregate query based on some weather data that we're capturing. Finally, we'll go through some additional services that are focused on analytics, such as Azure Stream Analytics, if you want to capture your data in real time, also Azure Databricks for more analytics, and then finally, we'll walk through some compute options if you're interested in that. Now, working with data in the cloud is pretty popular because data itself can be a lot of work to maintain. And normally when you have it on the server, you have to also worry about the hardware. So you have to worry about maintenance and also things like backup and security and recovery and load balancing, things that you have to configure yourself usually. These are all set up for you in the cloud. So all you have to do is just upload your data or migrate your data to the cloud, and most of these things are going to be set up for you. You don't have to configure them yourself. Another piece of the cloud that's really great is that you kind of can bring whatever data set that you have and use the tools that you know and love. And so there are ways to easily bring your data to Azure and migrate it, and we'll talk through that a little later. And also there's many options for storing your data. As I mentioned before, you can kind of just bring your data set, whatever that one is, and then usually there's going to be a service that maps directly to that. So say that you might find a service that works for your needs, but you actually don't prefer that. You can actually go ahead and store it in a virtual machine. So say that you already have an environment that you like already maybe on your computer, on your local machine, and you want to replicate that in the cloud so that you have a little bit more compute options for you. You can also do that in a virtual machine. It's very flexible, and one of the great things about the cloud is that things like the backup and security are already managed for you, so you can just kind of focus on your data without having to worry about things that you would have to configure and be thinking about when you are working on a server. So now let's get into a little of the terminology here. So on-premise, or also called on-prem, is a is a very, very common term that you'll hear a lot of people talk about, especially in enterprise, but it also applies in many other situations, because all it really describes is the physical servers that are hosting your data or your services. So not only databases, but this can be like things like websites. So if you ever hear somebody say on-premise or on-prem, they just mean local on a server. Migration is just a process of moving data or those services from one location to another. And usually when we're talking about the cloud, migration usually is the option of migrating your data from on-premise server, so a local server, to the cloud. Another term that's pretty common is integration. And integration is that ability to use other tools and services. So one of the great things about working with the cloud is that when you use one service, there's usually another service that integrates really well with it. So for example, Cosmos DB has the ability for you to use the MongoDB API. So, and that's the API that you would use even if you had MongoDB on another server somewhere. And then another topic here is seamless. Seamless just means that an ability to perform action on your data or make some changes to your data without any obvious changes or really getting in your way of continuing your work while that change or whatever that action is happening. So when we talk about seamless migration and you want to migrate your data from maybe the on-premise server to the cloud and you still want to work, it would be seamless if you continue your work without having to have any interruptions. Now, fully managed means just all those things I was mentioning before, like backups and load balancing and security. Those are features that are just built in when you are using a service in the cloud. So these are features that you don't have to worry about or think about or configure yourself as you would with an on-premise server. And finally, scalable means that you have an ability to meet the varying demands of traffic or data and file processing. So if you are needing some more compute resources, either on a virtual machine or on your data or your files, whatever you're using, the cloud has the ability to scale up to meet that demand that you need, and also the ability to scale back when that demand is not needed anymore. So moving on to the Azure Data Platform, these are services, these are not all the data services within the Azure Data Platform, but these are the most popular and the ones that are really great and really great for integrating with other services. So to the left is our databases. So like I mentioned, Azure SQL Database, Cosmos DB, MySQL, Postgres, and MariaDB. For warehousing, we have Azure Synapse Analytics in the middle there, and then to the right, for any data lakes or analytics, we have Azure Data Lake, Databricks, and HD Insight.